silhouettes and movement of characters, the color and line work within the surfaces of objects, but there's some fundamental rendering technologies that contribute to the look that we are exploring for the next generation. Now, I think the technique that most of you probably attribute to Borderlands the most is the edge outlining. It's not cell shading, but we do outline the edges, and if he goes into the black and white view, you can see this approach for Borderlands 2, Borderlands 1, and Borderlands the pre-sequel. This is a standard Sobel-Feldman edge detection operator. It's a solid, uniform line weight around the outlines of objects that we detect in the rendering. Now, we want to evolve this look for the future. We want to make it more natural and basically next gen. So the first thing we do, if you can go back to color, is instead of just detecting the edge and rendering the line both inside and out, the inside will sort of erode and corrupt the detail of the object we're trying to highlight. We'll now draw from the middle out only. It's sort of a middle out algorithm. Then we go to variable line weight. This is really important. We also want to do inside silhouettes and edge lines. So if you look at the black and white view again, you can see that there's detailed line work with a variable line weight on the inside of the objects now to highlight more detail in the scene. But with variable line weight on both the inside and the outside of the edge lines, we can now kind of show detail that's affected by the lighting and the orientation of the camera. So we can look at the scene again in color. And now, edges are only a part of it. The surface materials themselves are very important. The artists contribute to the look and feel of the graphic style by how they paint the materials. Now, this is a test sphere, and it shows some materials, a material on there, and you'll notice there's little black outlines, edges around it. Those black outlines are drawn into the materials themselves, and they're kind of similar to that edge outline, but they're drawn onto the material. We want to render those edge outlines in ways that aren't affected by the lighting of the scene. So now we can isolate those, and we can make them look like wet ink. So you'll notice that only the black outlines are reflective, like as if it's a wet ink, or we can make them look like metal. Or we can keep them as solid black lines, just like the edge outlines in the scene, and now they're not taking any light at all. There's no highlights there. This is really important for the artist's scribbles and doodles and cross-hatching, which simulate shadows, to come through for the scene. The neat thing about this test sphere, though, is it also gives us the opportunity to show you how we can use a similar technique to actually render cross-hatching dependent on the lighting in the scene. So if he goes to black and white view and brings up the cross-hatching, you'll see there's now a cross-hatch layer which will render shadow only where shadows exist, and in fact render highlights only where highlights exist. These are custom materials that are on top of the base material that add to the complexity of the scene. The other step, though, is in fact, let's look at a production asset. I want to see this in a production asset really quick. This is a very Borderlands gearbox-looking production asset rendered in Unreal Engine 4. You'll notice that even the little bolts on those objects are casting a little shadow, and those shadows are taking a little bit of crosshatch. That's that custom crosshatch layer there. And you can see it again in black and white. Now, one of the problems with this approach, though, and why we had to advance even further, is in the Borderlands work that we do, we tend to do a lot of kit bashing. We'll use assets in lots of interesting ways, lots of different ways. We'll scale those assets up and down. And when we scale an asset up, it will actually change the scale of that cross-hatching, which makes it inconsistent with the line work that we're doing on the edges. So we wanted to work with an experiment with a procedural approach to this, using artist-generated cross-hatches, but rendering them more procedurally on the surfaces of the objects. So if we start with this gray sphere, and we put a crosshatch on it that's now procedural and mapped to the object, you can see that it'll hold the same consistency at any scale. And in fact, we also want to show a highlight on this as well, so we can render a highlight on the other side. Now you notice that the transition between the highlight and the shadow is not perfectly uniform. We think that the artist's hand is really important in the style and feel of Borderlands. So you'll notice it almost looks like someone took like a spray paint can to start to spray paint that shadow on there, and the ink didn't perfectly fall on that surface as you'd expect from a software rendering solution. So that transition is not uniform. Now I also want to point out that this has full interaction with PVR. So as he affects roughness, you'll notice that the reflections erode the inks, or if he changes to a highly reflective metal surface, all of the inks take the shape of the objects that the metal's reflecting. This is really incredible technology, and this is only accessible to us with Unreal Engine 4 and the current and future hardware specifications that we're targeting with this technology. Now let's look at a more complex shape, a more complex form. This form right now is smooth, but we have a normal map for this form, and you'll notice that it looks like there's a gearbox